What's up, guys? Welcome to the All Love, All Hate Fantasy Football Podcast. We're starting episode 3 today, and I'm ready to kick it off here with Jacob Reeder, your co-host.
I'm Chris Langley.
And I'm Payton Hedrick.
And we're going to get straight into weekly words.
All right, so our first story this week, guys, more injuries just keep happening in the NFL. Just when we think we might actually finally get a break and the players can finally at least stay healthy, just more and more guys are getting either taken out of the game or put on IR. And one player that was put on IR recently was the Chiefs running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He suffered a MCL sprain in Sunday night's matchup against the Buffalo Bills. He will be out for at least 3 weeks, if not longer. And now it seems like Darrel Williams, the backup running back, but also a decent red zone threat, seems like so far this year, will be taking the starting role with Jerick McKinnon and a couple other running backs that I believe just got elevated to the active roster, backing him up, or at least acting as a second or possibly even third down back. So with Clyde out, how do y'all see Darrel Williams fitting in? Do you think he could be putting up some decent numbers considering he was already putting up numbers as is with him being a red zone threat? Or do you think this is where we see the basically near 100% passing attack from the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely pass the ball a lot just because it's the Chiefs and that's their bread and butter. But I feel comfortable starting Darrell Henderson in at least my flex spot in fantasy. And I think he's going to get at least 15 carries a game while Clyde's out. So he's there. He's going to get work. McKinnon could see a lot of work in the pass game. And we'll just see how the ball falls, you know.
Yeah, I think he's going to get a lot of work as well, and I think he's going to, take that work and make the most out of it and put up probably some pretty good fantasy weeks. And, I think that this is an opportunity for him to become that number one and, take Clyde's spot maybe. This is a good opportunity for him. And if that happens, his fantasy value is only going up from here. So I think if you don't have him, try and get him before it happens.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's 3 weeks minimum. It could be out a lot longer than we think.
A lot can happen in those 3 weeks too.
Yeah, that's true.
And one more thing on that, I also heard today that there's rumors of Marlon Mack possibly being traded to the Chiefs. I know we talked about him a couple weeks ago. I think that was episode 1. If he does go there somehow, we have been seeing him get a few rushes and
watching last night or Monday night. My apologies. He had some great-looking long runs that he broke some tackles, looked explosive, looked fast. It's almost like they were just putting him in there for those few plays just to give him that good juice just to get him to trade. And that might be what the Kansas City Chiefs need. And, hey, who knows? He may be more talented and get better workload than Clyde does.
Possibly. I just wanted to throw that in there before we got to the next topic.
Could be interesting.
Definitely watch the news for the next few days. This could be a trade that happens, if not before this week, maybe next week. But
I don't think it's too ridiculous of a trade because you really don't have to give up a whole lot for Marlon Mack. You haven't seen enough from him to be like everyone's jumping at the gun to get him. But you never know.
Yeah, and another guy who's out for the season now is Juju Smith-Schuster. It's a tough blow. He wasn't looking too great. Big Ben hasn't been helping anybody out over there in Pittsburgh. But in my opinion, I think Deontay Johnson will just boost his stock even more than he's been. I think he could be a superstar now with Juju's few targets that he gets. And Claypool's going to be that guy who's there as the number 2. But Deontay Johnson's who I'm looking for. What do you guys think? Johnson, Claypool, Najee Harris, the tight ends. What's going to think is going to go on with Juju out now for the season?
I think the receivers will definitely see a little bit more, like an increase in their receptions and targets. But I really don't see that being the same thing for Najee. He's already, he's getting ridiculous amount of targets from the passing game. He's rushing the ball. He's doing great. He looks really good. Not to say that he definitely won't, because obviously you're going to have one less guy. You got to figure out those different ways to kind of cater to that and cater to other guys that have to step up. But it also just depends on the matchup.
Right.
So, obviously, some games you're going to want to run the ball more on a defense that's better protecting the pass. Sometimes you're going to want to pass the ball more. And it just really depends.
Yeah, I agree with you. I still, as mentioned earlier, I still think Juju is around wide receiver 3 now on that depth chart. I think Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool passed him up last year. I mean, we obviously saw Johnson had a breakout year. Claypool had a really good rookie campaign. So I don't really see their production being bumping up like that much. They'll still be higher, but I mean they're already putting up good numbers as is. The one thing to watch out for is and this is watch out for the entire Steelers offense is Big Ben or Ben Roethlisberger. He hasn't looked sharp this year. I mean, obviously it reminds me a lot of Drew Brees last year, where it was just like a slow but very bad decline in terms of production. And I don't know. It's a little worrisome because, like, in fantasy, Johnson and Claypool are valuable receivers / flex options. Najee's pretty much a guaranteed RB1 now, so I would just say, if anything, their production should still be good, but I would watch for Roethlisberger, because who knows, like, if it's going to get any worse. He did have a good game, though, against the Broncos, though.
Yeah, so that's true.
It is a possibility.
I'm going to jump into our last thing in this topic, and that is the injury, the New York injury. I don't even know what to call them, but their entire offense is injured, basically, and that's the Giants. Yeah. I mean, Danny Dimes is out. We saw Saquon go down.
Kenny Galladay went down.
Galladay. Sterling Shepard, who might make a return this week. Kadarius Toney, also questionable. DeAndre Slayton, also questionable.
Darius
Slayton, my bad.
Yeah, it's all good.
But, their whole team is pretty banged up. So, and they're playing the Rams. I mean, the Rams defense, I think personally is great, even though they haven't really been playing all that well this year. But it's definitely going to be a tough matchup, and all those injuries only make it worse. So I think it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be really hard for the Giants to pull one out.
Yeah, that'll be tough to watch, but I think we'll be talking about Saquon's backup, and now he's going to be taking that role later on in the show, but it'll definitely be a tough one to watch. I would predict the Rams just rolling over them, but we'll have to wait and see.
It was already a tough matchup to begin with, but now, like, with half that offense gone, I mean, Mike Glenn's going to be the starting quarterback. Devontae Booker is the starting running back, which we'll get to later in the show, see how his production does. John Ross could be, I mean, Slayton and Shepard coming back, they're going to be the wide receiver 1 and 2 now. At one point, they were looking like they were going to start John Ross and Colin Johnson at receiver. Kadarius Toney could come back, but I mean, I didn't even see the Giants winning this matchup, even with everyone healthy. This is just going to be a much harder matchup now.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what. If you're in a league that you start a defense, I think it's an obvious start this week to start the Rams. I mean, you could see quite a few takeaways, especially, I mean, picks from Mike Glennon and just, I mean, wide receivers not being 100% on their route, and they're. Like, you're going to see guys not on the same page just because it's so deep into backups at this point.
Right.
So there's going to be mistakes, and, I mean, the Rams are probably going to have one of their best weeks this week.
Yeah. Before we – sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, I didn't know if you were going to add to the Saquon thing. One thing we should at least address, I mean, I know it's old news now, but this is also something to watch out for. Another player that's out for a very decent stretch of time, Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. We saw last week – his finger got messed up, and he's now going to be out, I want to say 6 to 8 weeks. I think 8's the max, but they're going to try to rush him back. Seahawks are already 2-3. I mean, how do y'all see the Seahawks moving forward now with Geno Smith at the helm?
Yeah, I think the running backs are still just going to be what they were before, solid RB2s, whoever's a starter there. DK will still probably get his just because he's that athletic and that big body receiver that Geno can just put the ball 5 yards within him.
Yeah, I only see DK's production going up because, like, oh, man, I don't know who to throw to. I don't know who to throw to. Feed DK. I mean, you could see this week against the Steelers, DK getting 20 targets. Like, realistically, you could see that happening. So.
Yeah. It's at Lockett as well. I mean, if anything, like, the one thing I would just say with Seattle, I can tell you there's one team that's happy Seattle might be on a losing streak, and that's the Jets, and that's because the Jets do have their first-round pick this year. Might want to keep an eye on that.
Gotcha.
But that will end Weekly Words, and y'all want to introduce the next segment?
Yeah, we'll get straight into Girl Talk.
first things first, let's get into last week's dog fight, no pun intended, between the painted dogs, Jacob, and the disappointments, myself. It really came down to that Monday night game because he had
Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, and he was down by about 40 points. And for a second there, especially once it started going into overtime, like when overtime looked to be like it was going to happen, I was on the edge of my seat, kind of worried, thinking maybe it could happen. He had that, 70-plus yard screen that he
76 yard. He didn't even get touched on that play. It was beautiful.
And that was the first minute of the game. Like when you see that, it's like
first drive.
I can only imagine what you were feeling when you saw it at the very beginning of the game.
Yeah, it was pretty tough because, I felt really good Sunday afternoon when I was like, oh man, I'm up by 40 points. Like, there's no way he hasn't put up numbers like this year.
Yeah,
there's no way that Jonathan Taylor comes and scores 45 points, and then midway through the fourth quarter, I was like, dude, if he scores one more time or gets a couple catches and a score or one really good drive, I'm going to lose. And I would have lost scoring I had the highest score of the week for any of our fantasy teams in our league so far this year. So if I would have lost, I would have been pretty upset. I mean, that would have been a really tough loss, especially on a Monday night game.
Right, and not only that, I think your score is up in the top 5 of all time for our league. You broke that 160. But I'll say this before I jump into his team: I can only imagine how you felt when you saw Blankenship miss that kick to go into overtime. When you thought I'm good, and then he misses. And went into overtime.
He had already been having. I believe he hurt his hip or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was a groin injury.
Groin, maybe.
It was either a groin or a leg injury.
So I wasn't really surprised by the missed field goal. I had actually texted Jacob before, dude, this is going into overtime. So I kind of expected it. Didn't want it to happen, obviously, but it all ended up being okay for me. Not so much for the dogs, who now fall to 1-4, I believe.
1-4 after 2 great scoring weeks.
Yeah.
It's tough to see, but against the 2 best teams in the league at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
I could have easily had 2 wins, lost by 12 to him on great scoring, and by 5.
I will say I'm glad I was able to give you your 1 victory so far.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But I will mention. I mean, it's not like your team's bad. We should mention that your team's good. I mean, you already you have arguably possibly the top 3 MVP candidate at QB in Justin Herbert. You have a stellar running back core of Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, and Joe Mixon. Wide receiving core, I mean, it's strong.
I think the painted dogs, Jacob, is only getting better. I mean, he had a trade with.
I can't go too farther down. So
yeah.
Well, don't jinx yourself.
He had a trade that just went through this morning. He acquired DJ Moore from Reed.
Yeah.
So I think DJ Moore is a great receiver. I know he didn't do amazing last week, but we've seen some great numbers from him, and they like him, and they're going to keep feeding him the ball. So I think it was a good pickup for his team. He did trade away Hollywood Brown and Trey Sermon, but I mean, we did see Hollywood Brown come off of a great game this week, scoring a bunch of points, but I just don't know if I see that every week from Hollywood Brown. And I think DJ Moore just has a higher ceiling to just blow up.
Yeah. I mean, Ravens' offense is definitely, we saw Mark Andrews had the 41 points. You know he's not going to be putting up, most games he doesn't even put up more than 10. Seems like there's always that one player each game that breaks out. Andrews had it this week. I want to say Brown had it a couple weeks ago. I mean, Lamar Jackson's really the only consistent one on that offense. So, but you got it at the right time though, because I want to say Brown scored 2 touchdowns last game.
And
so you got his value up.
He's not going to do that every week because you got to think that Lamar Jackson had over 400 passing yards this week. I mean, he had an insane game that might not happen the rest of the season.
Right.
It's definitely not likely to happen, but it just might not happen. So, I don't know. I personally like DJ Moore, and I think that only helps his team.
Yeah, I'm excited for DJ Moore on my team. Hollywood, I got Rashad Bateman on my team too. He's coming back hopefully this week. He's been supposed to come back for a while, but I like his talent. I've loved him since he opted out halfway through the year at Minnesota last year, so I'm excited to watch him play too. And I was ready to get out on Hollywood. I got a very deep wide receiver core, and I just upgraded, in my opinion, on DJ Moore. So I'm excited. Not saying it's going to turn out well, but I'm hoping for it. And another guy, Langley, also was in a relatively large trade last night with Shawn.
I'm rebuilding right now, so I was willing to take this trade.
So, traded away Chris Godwin, one of his pretty pillar pieces at the moment, for Shawn's first rounder and Kadarius Toney, who's been great as of late. He's looked really good. And it's just the move of a rebuilder, and that's fine.
Right.
And he gave away a big piece, but he got something back in return. So
yeah.
I generally don't love the trade, but I can't really hate against it because that's kind of what he needed to do.
I mean, I'll mention this. The original trade was going to be a first and a second. I wanted to at least get a player back. And out of all the guys that I looked at on his team, which I should mention, he has a lot. He actually had some decent guys at disposal. But after Toney last game, I mean, obviously, Giants lost half their offense against the Cowboys. But I personally think Kadarius Toney could be like a good move. He reminds me of more of a Rondale Moore type of player where he's also using the rushing game.
Right.
Granted, it's not as high as Moore. Moore gets like 2 or 3 carries a game. Toney, I think, has only gotten 1 in the past 2 games. No, it's 1 each in the past 2 games. Right. But I mean, 9 catches on 10 targets for 100 and I want to say 89 yards. Not in that ballpark before getting, believe it or not, ejected in the game for throwing a punch.
Yeah.
I'm willing to take the jump on this because, like I said, I'm in rebuild mode right now, and I don't know. I feel like Godwin just will not put up as many points as he normally would because Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, like the Bucs have such an incredible amount of receivers and tight ends at their disposal. Not all these guys are going to put up consistent numbers every week. I mean, last week, Godwin and Evans found the end zone twice each.
Right. Godwin
did not find the end zone at all. And while the other guys got around 20, 25 points in half PPR, Godwin got 7.
Right.
I'm willing to let this trade happen. It gives me an extra first as I'm able to rebuild, and I'm just looking for the future. I already wrote the season off for me. It's now rebuild time, and that's what I'm making with this trade.
The main thing about rebuilding is getting those picks, and you got a first. So, I mean, you really can't complain with that. I think one thing to mention as our last thing here in Girl Talk is we had our first trade this week that got vetoed. Seen some bad trades over the years. Seen some bad trades this year. But our first veto, definitely the worst trade of the season. That's why it got vetoed. And honestly, I don't even think it's enough worth bringing up what the trade is. But I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I mean, should we at least say it just so people have an idea? Because we've had
Alex
bad
Collins,
trades.
Jerry McNichols, a second or third for a first round pick. You're trading backup running backs for future assets.
And Jeremy McNichols, as good as he looks when he does touch the field behind Derrick Henry, he might be a third string next week.
Right.
So, that it is what it is. Got vetoed. I think everybody would agree with that veto.
Outside the 2 people who made the trade.
Yeah.
Well, maybe one. One started having second thoughts after he saw the majority of us saying this is the worst trade of all time. I mean, the fact that he usurped my trade as the worst of all time, I'm happy with that. And for context, the trade that I was the worst, I still don't think it was the worst because he hasn't really been active that much this year, but I traded away Christian McCaffrey and Tyler Lockett for J.K. Dobbins, Allen Robinson, a first and a second round pick the night of our draft. And, I mean, so far it feels like no one's really won that trade because half those guys are injured and Lockett hasn't been putting up as much points as he was week 1 and week 2. But at least someone's finally usurped my trade.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with that.
All right, and we're going to get into our next segment, Bourbon Bowl, and we're going to bring in our guest for this week. All right, now we're starting our next segment, Bourbon Bowl. Just want to introduce our special guest for this week, Shawn Howell.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. We're going to get straight into it with Langley's Bourbon Bowl pick for this episode 3.
All right, well, I'm heading back to real life. I'm gonna take a step out of the side of fantasy football. We're going to have a really good matchup this week with the last undefeated team in the league, the 5-0 Cardinals, facing I would personally have top 10, maybe top 5 team in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, Arizona Cardinals, they have been they're the leader in the juggernaut that is the NFC West. I don't think that's even up for debate. The NFC West is just stacked. Well, as long as all the teams are healthy, at least. But I mean, the Cleveland Browns, they should have had the win last week against the Chargers, but they just couldn't hold it, and they ended up falling to 3-2 after losing to the Chargers 47-42. But I mean, this is going to be a great matchup. I mean, we already know what the Cleveland Browns offense is capable of. We saw that last year. But wow, the Cardinals just, I don't know what they did. I mean, that offense is on fire. Defense looks solid. I mean, Kyler Murray is up there with Herbert and Tom Brady as an MVP candidate. DeAndre Hopkins still looks as good as ever. Chase Edmonds is doing pretty good. With James Conner being a really good red zone threat, I should mention. And that defense has been strong all year. And I don't see, and although it's not talked about as much, if you compare it to like the Bills and the Rams, it's still one to keep an eye on because again they're 5-0. But personally, I think potentially the Browns are going to come in that game like with not really a vengeance against the Cardinals, but blowing that lead to the Chargers. They're going to be like, all right, we need to win this game or else we fall into 500 on the year. I see the Browns winning this game against Arizona. Payton, what do you think?
I actually disagree with that. I think the Cardinals continue to stay undefeated after this week. I think it's going to be a great game to watch. Definitely one I'm going to want to watch. And I think the Browns do come out swinging right away. It's going to be a hot start for them. But I don't know. I don't see that offense defeating the Cardinals. I mean, I don't think anyone really expected the Cardinals to start off this hot. And, I mean, that defense is really overlooked. And I think the addition of J.J. Watt over the summer, really stepped that defense up. Maybe just some kind of veteran presence, some kind of leader presence really just made that defense step up to the next level. I think the Cardinals continue to stay undefeated this week. And my Bourbon Bowl matchup this week is going to be the Bills versus Titans. This is another Monday night game that's going to be great. We've seen a lot of great Monday night games this year. And, I mean, the Titans, they're not the best team in the league, not really close to it, but I think maybe they could pull through and make this a really interesting game. I think it's going to be really close. It's going to come down to the end. But the Bills probably, top 3 in the NFL, and I think they keep going with it. I think the ball is only starting to roll for them. I think they're starting to, turn up the flame a little bit and get some heat, and I think they keep going, and maybe this starts a win streak for them.
Yeah, going off of yours, I'm going to pick the Bills. So you're picking the Bills also?
Yeah,
I'm going to pick the Bills. To me, they look like the best team in the league right now. Defense is dominating. Offense is hot. Emmanuel Sanders, Stephon Diggs isn't scoring, but he's still doing everything he needs to do. Dawson Knox is on fire. Zach Moss is looking good. You can't stop this team right now on either side of the ball, and I don't think the Titans have a chance, if I'm being completely honest. I'm going to get straight into mine. The Panthers also have a great defense and are facing a tough passing offense this week with Justin Jefferson there. Adam Thielen's also there, but Justin Jefferson's really a star of the show now. Thielen's getting older and just not getting as many targets as Jefferson is. And the Panthers have acquired a couple of new corners in the past couple of weekends. I'm not sure exactly who's going to play and who's going to start this week, but I just am interested to see how Thielen, and especially Justin Jefferson, play against the likes of Stephon Gilmore if he's active, C.J. Henderson, Dante Jackson, and A.J. Bouye, and just watch how that plays out, because it just interests me to watch these wide receivers go straight up against top corner talent. What you got, Shawn, to close this out?
Yeah, so, looking at Justin Jefferson versus the Panthers defense, I think a big factor is going to be Jeremy Chin. It's a top-tier free safety, in my opinion. I think he's one of the better younger guys on the upcoming. So I think he's going to be a big factor when it comes to that. Also, kind of expecting Thielen to be the Robert Woods that was last week. And just kind of, Justin Jefferson's going to open up a lot of play for Thielen this time around. But going off of that, going into my Bourbon Bowl pick, I actually have the Asheville Ash Cheeks, who's currently ranked first in the All Love Fantasy League. going up against the Leftovers, who are coming off a very big hot streak right now. I actually have the Leftovers taking this one. I think just the initial depth of the Asheville Ash Cheeks is just too weak. Granted, he did go ahead and trade away Robert Woods for Pittman, Pollard, and I believe he also got Gordon in that trade. But I just don't see Ashton's team really holding their own completely this week. And I just with James Robinson and Najee Harris putting up 20 each, DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin also doing great. Dawson Knox is on fire. Josh Jacobs is he's going to get you a touchdown. The only real worries on the Leftovers teams are just Boyd, in my opinion. Maybe Jalen Hurts because they're playing the Tampa Bay defense this week. But, the Leftovers just look great, and Ashton looks weak, so that's what I'm going to go with.
What you think about that, Lang?
Who do you got winning this week? Reed?
Yes.
I like Boyd. He's definitely looked good, at least in relief of Higgins. So in the 2 weeks or so Higgins was out. One thing to watch for is with him not having DJ Moore anymore, he will probably have to start Brown, which will be interesting because just like you said earlier, Browns have not been very consistent. The whole Ravens offense outside of Lamar hasn't been consistent. And Reed started out 0-3 and then absolutely, crushed me week 4, and then came out and he crushed me last week. He crushed Amani week 4. My apologies. And he's now 2-3, and he's making a playoff push, probably as strong as anybody. And with that trade, he's trying to make it into the playoffs for the first time in our league. So I personally could see Reed coming out and taking down the only undefeated team in fantasy. I just feel like I see he has Tony Pollard. Ashton has Tony Pollard starting, which, say what you want about Pollard, he can put up points, but who knows how many points he'll really put up against, because it seems like Zeke is starting to regain form that he had in 2016, 2018.
Yeah, and it could be 4, it could be 24. You never really know. If he finds his way to the end zone this week, it's definitely going to be a big help for him, but I kind of agree with you guys. He's going to lose eventually, and I think maybe Reed beats him this week.
And as you guys know, the Mud Dogs won the Bourbon Bowl. So we'll have to check it out later next week and see how our Bourbon Bowl picks did, whether it's a team or a player. But we're going to get straight into our hot takes.
That's a spicy meatball.
Looking back at last week's hot takes, Payton was our first winner of the week. Kyle Pitts did score his first touchdown of his young career, looking very good last week against the Jets in London. Langley did not get his first hot take correctly. He is now 0-2 on the season. Mac Davis did not outscore Cordero Patterson.
I don't want to talk about it.
And then my hot take was that Dalvin Cook was going to score over 20 fantasy points. Dalvin Cook ended up not playing at all. But Madison did score over 20 fantasy points, so I was thinking we were going to get a half point, but we're just going to go I'm 0-2 also. So now Payton is leading our hot take segment, and we're going to get straight into it with Payton's hot take of week 3. Episode 3, my apologies.
Yeah. So my hot take this week is that quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow, will be a top 5 fantasy scoring quarterback this week. He's got the toughest matchup of the week going against the Lions. That was very sarcastic. He's playing the Lions this week. He's got all of his receivers healthy. I think he's just going to air it out. And I think he's going to have a lethal passing game this week and be a top 5 quarterback. That's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, I like that pick. He's looked good. Almost beat the Packers last week, and he's got his full arsenal back. So it'll definitely be fun to watch.
He's due for a big game.
It'll be fun to watch. My hot take this week is hopefully a player that will play. Devontae Smith has looked really good. Jalen Hurts has been looking at him and his tight ends a lot recently. I have Devontae Smith scoring over 20 fantasy points against the Buccaneers, who have not been good against the pass recently. They're playing tomorrow night, so it'll be fun to watch on prime time to see if Devontae Smith can score a couple touchdowns, maybe have 100 yards. We'll see how it works out. And maybe even the Eagles get a little win against the defending national champions.
as much as that hurts to say. We're all Saints fans.
Yep.
It's possible. It is potentially possible. I mean, it just really, like I said, really depends if he can find the end zone at least. If he can get enough catches once, but he'll probably need two, if anything. Hopping into my hot take, I'm going back to your Bourbon Bowl, the Bills and Titans. I have Derrick Henry in my other league, and so far he's been fantastic. He is the number one fantasy running back right now, and probably will be for the rest of the year, barring an injury or if he gets usurped by guys like Eckler or, sadly, because he's third, even though it's probably not going to happen, Cordarrelle Patterson. But he scored 3 touchdowns last week, which is pretty rare for running back, at least it seems these days. Going up against the Bills, who I want to say, according to your sheet, only have let up 9.3 points to running backs.
9.8 points to running backs, 13.2 to wide receivers, and only 12.4 to quarterbacks.
Yeah, there's a reason they're the number one fantasy defense right now, if not top 5. I don't know if they're still number 1 going into this week, but I have Derrick Henry either scoring 1 touchdown or scoring none. I don't think he's going to get a multi-touchdown game. I think because especially with the Bills being so good, they're going to have to rely on the passing game with Ryan Tannehill, A.J. Brown, and Julio. Julio's active, correct?
I'm not sure. We'll see.
All right. I mean, I think just because they'll be down, they have to rely on the passing tech. Although Derrick Henry has been using the passing tech before. I mean, granted, he's not getting a ton of catches, but it's still catches nonetheless. I just don't see him finding the end zone that much just because they're going to be playing catch-up. So it's 1 or none. I don't think he cracks 2.
Yeah, just a small little fact jumping off that. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Derrick Henry, with all the production he's been given this year, he's actually on pace to break the rushing attempt record this year and, shatter it. So I just thought that was a cool little side note to throw in there.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, he broke 2,000 last year, and it seems like he has more work this year. And plus, remember the extra game.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of records are going to get single season records are going to start breaking soon because of that extra game.
Maybe not this year, but next year. I think.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And Shawn, close us out. What you got?
All right, so my hot take is going to be that Devontae Booker puts up 15 or more this week. Like I believe you guys were saying earlier, just even like the whole Giants offense is just murdered right now. They're just done. They're in the grave. Booker's just, easy to run the ball. It makes it a lot simpler in football. So I think he's got a big workload ahead of him. And just because of that fact, I think he's going to get 15 or more points. I think he's going to at least get a touchdown this game. But, yeah, he's going to have a lot of work ahead of him this week. So I think that's the reason why he's going to get 15+.
And that hits close to home as you had Saquon and now have Devontae Booker.
Yes. But luckily, Saquon update about that looks to only be out for a month. So should have him back come, 4 weeks or so.
All right, that's our hot takes for this week. We appreciate y'all coming in. We're going to have Shawn close us out real quick.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me again. It was a pleasure, pleasure doing business with Langley. Always great to see you guys. Go check out Big Patty Podcast, airing soon, filming tonight. Go check us out. But that's all. Thanks for having me.
I'm Chris Langley.
Jacob Reeder.
Payton Hedrick.
And that's the episode 3 of the All Love, All Hate Fantasy Football Podcast.
See you next week.
Appreciate y'all coming.